Let me pray for us, and then we'll get started about what we're going to talk about, all right? Hey, God, just thank you for who you are. God, thank you for the way that you love us. God, I'm so grateful for how you created us, God, how you love us, how you look out for us, God, even in our brokenness, even when we don't feel you. God, I pray for anyone tonight dealing with brokenness or things that we're carrying, God, you can just remind us that you love us despite the things that we are carrying. Amen. So Jordan asked, or Nick asked if we would talk about mental health, and I think it's a term that we throw around a lot, right? Mental health. We have a lot of ideas that we attach to it, different things. But I thought it would be more interesting instead of me giving a lesson that I've given like 12 different times. My very quick, condensed version of that lesson that you don't get to hear, because we're gonna do something different, is that if you look at any stats, especially for teenagers and people in their younger 20s, mental health is on the rise, and a lot of people are calling what we are experiencing a mental health epidemic. Um, you have things like anxiety and depression, and especially loneliness, which isn't exactly a mental health thing, but destroys our mental health. Um, are really wrecking people. Things like the way you look at the impact social media has had on younger people. And fortunately for me, I was 18 when Facebook launched. Instagram didn't exist. Uh, Snapchat didn't exist. And Facebook was not nearly what it was today. It was you could interact with the 5 people that you know, and it was not at all what it is today. And so I didn't really grow up in that. I don't fully understand that. Um, and so for you guys, I want you to understand that those things are crazy, and a lot of times you're going to experience things at your age that you don't fully know what it is, or how to put words to, or what you're experiencing. And so what I wanted to do today, Courtney actually is going to share some of her story. Um, she is diagnosed bipolar and has been since she was 18, and I'll let her talk about that in a second. And a lot of you guys may not get diagnosis in your life, but what I can tell you is learning how to understand what you're feeling and experiencing, and learning how to get yourself out of that and what you can do and finding things like that is going to be important for all of you. If you're in middle school, I remember literally saying in middle school, why can't depressed people just choose to be happy? And then I learned when I was 17 or 18 and slipped into a 6-month depression that that's not really how that works. But middle school me didn't know any different. And just like you guys, if you haven't experienced things, if you haven't dealt with things, you may not know how to ask questions or what you're experiencing or how to feel. And so I thought I'm going to give Courtney a chance to talk about her story. We're going to ask some questions. She actually did a journey video, but she's dealt with a whole lot more in the last 3 years. And so we're going to focus a little bit on that. We're going to start off with Courtney. I'm going to let you explain how you learned about your diagnosis, what it looks like, what bipolar is, because a lot of people probably don't know other than like, oh, I'm so bipolar.
Yeah, so I'll start with that because I think sometimes people use that term just willy-nilly, if you will. Like sometimes people say like that's autism, but it's not necessarily, and you're just using it to mean something else, like they're too particular or they're highs and lows or they're emotional or something like that. So bipolar, actually by diagnosis, is having manic and depressive episodes. So it's not that you're always low and you're always depressed, and it's not that you're always high and hyper, it's both. So for me, when I was 18, I was a senior in high school. And oftentimes, with hormonal changes as well as transitions in life, like high stress periods, that can be the onset for people. And that's what happened for me. So I was 18. I had just broken up with my boyfriend. I was getting ready to graduate because I was a December grad and doing college classes, working, and all of the things, and found myself in a very excited state, was overly ambitious and motivated to want to clean and organize, to write thank you notes to a whole bunch of friends, couldn't sleep, woke up and made pancakes. Well, didn't wake up because I hadn't slept, but like went downstairs to go make pancakes at like 2 in the morning because I got hungry and just was like go, go, go and racing around and couldn't slow down my thoughts. And then it was when my mom realized like there's something going on here and she had seen it before. So she knew what was going on and realized like I needed help. I think 3 or 4 days went by before I had slept at all. So that was my first peak of mania. And then had later experienced some long phases of depression and was diagnosed bipolar. I did spend some time in 2 different behavioral health facilities, like Parkview Behavioral Health, to get medicine regulated and get the help that I needed right away. But it still was a long process. I would say from January until August, when I went away to school at Huntington, I was working. I was working to regulate medications and dealing with figuring out how to live life with that new diagnosis.
Yeah, so I remember I obviously didn't, obviously is not the right word. let me back up. I didn't know Courtney until we met at Huntington after all this had already happened. So I never knew her during all this. But I know one thing that she shared with me that I think is really, really important for you guys. And so this is true whether you might be bipolar or not. When you were diagnosed bipolar, you did not know your dad was also bipolar, correct?
Yeah, I had no idea. And even my grandpa, like it ran in our family. My uncle, my dad, my grandpa, probably more of my family too.
Yeah, so a lot of conditions that people are diagnosed with tend to be genetic. That's physical or mental, right? A lot of things that you experience and feelings you will experience, your parents or grandparents may have also experienced. But this is something that a lot of people don't like to talk about. Or for your dad, he was on medication for a long time. It's probably like, yeah, it's not really that big of a deal. But I would highly encourage you, especially getting into middle school and high school, if you have a good relationship with your parents, to ask them about things that they wrestle with, that they have dealt with mentally or physically. And you can be also looking for those things. Because for Courtney, she had no idea, but maybe could have been able to assess some of those things a little earlier until her mom goes, "Oh, I saw this in your dad 20 years ago." And so I would highly encourage you, if you have a good relationship with your parents and can ask them, a lot of things are genetic or nature versus nurture. You're growing up in the same environments that they did. You may experience some of those same things. And so I encourage you to ask them, what have they experienced, things like that. And so um, after Courtney was diagnosed, like I said, I met her in Huntington and was kind of like, this was never a part of our lives. And so if you want to talk about kind of phase two of your bipolar journey.
Yeah, so I took medicine for several years. I was on lithium, which is a pretty common old school medication with relatively minimal side effects. And it happened to be the same medicine that my dad had been on when he was going through his diagnosis and for multiple years. But there can be damage to your kidneys. So they monitor those with blood tests. So about every month or every 3 months, I would have to get my blood drawn and make sure I was okay. And I would say probably about 10 years in. So my first diagnosis was in 2005. So probably around 2015, give or take. My kidney levels were starting to show level 1 kidney failure. So the choice was let your kidneys fail or come off of your bipolar meds, neither of which sound great. So my psychiatrist here in town said, we're going to stop off cold turkey. You're not going to take your lithium anymore. And we're going to wait and see what happens because I can't give you another bipolar medicine when you're stable because we won't know if it's working. Like there's no way to tell if you'd remain stable with this medicine or if you would have been stable even without. So I was nervous going off of it. We were just transitioning to me starting my second master's, getting ready to sell our house and build. And
I think it was before that, but
right before, yeah. So there was like a lot of phases of things that I'm like a little nervous about, but we're like, okay, well, we don't have a choice. So came off the medicine and nervous for a while, but then nothing seemed to change. Like I seemed to remain pretty stable and I didn't notice any differences for quite some time. Like, I don't know, probably 5 years.
yeah, I mean, so like I said, we've been together for about 18 years, I think. Um, Up until 3 years ago, I would tell you I have no idea what bipolar looks like. Up until a year ago, I would say I don't know that I could have really explained it even at all. And so I know for me, and I think you maybe felt this way at times, like I kind of thought Courtney has a diagnosis that's a label, but like it's not really a part of our lives. And I think that was the biggest thing that I learned the last few years, and you probably learned as well, is and this is what I cannot stress, I think, for you guys enough. If you are if you are feeling something you can't explain, if you are experiencing things, you have a lot of hormonal changes, physical changes, lots of things change in your, that 13 to 18 range until you graduate, right? I don't believe you can just sit there and hope that things will change and get better, or pretend like later in your life things will somehow fix themselves. Um, because as Courtney and I found, I thought this was never a part of our story and our journey. And she's going to share here in a second how that changed. But if you are dealing with something, and I don't say this to scare you, I say this so that you treat things with the importance they should be treated with, there's a good chance those things are lifelong things that you will deal with, even if they are under control for a while. Like Courtney said, I mean, it was 15 years plus that Courtney really didn't have to deal anything with her bipolar diagnosis. But your hormones change, your body will change, things react differently. You might be put in stressful situations that trigger it. There's lots of things that could happen over time. And so I encourage you, like I said, if you are feeling or experiencing something that you're not sure what it is, find someone to talk about, try to understand it, try to get yourself out of the situation. Um, because, like Courtney will share, you got into a stressful situation and things obviously took a turn.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, I would say just like anything, it can manifest differently. So, like, not everyone who has bipolar doesn't feel the same. Like, people that might have a similar diagnosis to you, like ADHD or something, it looks different for every person. Some people like constantly shake, other people are like bouncing off the walls, some people like just space out and can't focus. Sorry.
that's me every day.
But there are different ways that the behaviors can manifest in different diagnoses. But for me, my bipolar usually manifests with mania. So I know it's starting to get out of control when I get very hyper and over motivated and eager to accomplish tasks and can't slow my brain down to sleep. And then it gets worse because it snowballs. And when I can't sleep, then I keep going. And when I keep going, then I can't sleep. And it just like intensifies. So usually for me, those can be maintained. And at first, when I noticed it starting to happen, I could tell, but I didn't want anyone to worry about me. I didn't want my mom or my sister to know. I didn't want Trevor to have to deal with it. I would just get up in the middle of the night and try to go take a bath and light a candle and read a book and rest and calm. I would try to hide because I was ashamed that I was going to have to deal with this all over again if it got harder and worse and snowballed. But if I pretended it didn't happen, then I could stop it from happening worse. Or so I thought. And then I think right at first when it happened, when we first had foster care kids, I was overwhelmed but excited. I was looking forward to scheduling their birthday parties and like planning things that we were going to do for Christmas with them. And I couldn't sleep at all for like a day and a half. And then I was like, okay, finally I got sleep the next day, so I'm okay. So then a year later it happened again. And then 6 months later it happened again. And then 3 months later it happened again. And then by the time I took on the principal job, it was happening like monthly. So I would start to go do crazy, ambitious things that were maybe slightly unplanned or um, not well thought out. Various things at work. I would have a great idea and like come up with this awesome plan and tell people about it, and nobody would push back to say like maybe we don't need to do that. But then like 3 weeks later, I'd be like, why are we doing this? Like it's gonna be so much work. Like whose idea was this? And I was just telling Xander today, like I love my tattoo and I'm glad that I got it, but I probably wouldn't have done it if I hadn't experienced as much mania. And maybe same with my nose ring, even though I love it, I still was like in a let's go, yes, let's do it kind of mood.
Yeah, you're someone who overplans things, and I remember the nose ring. So I was playing board games, or I think it was game weekend. I don't remember. Courtney came home and she goes, "I'm going to pick Lily up to go get our nose clears." And I was like, "What?" And she goes, "Yeah, I talked about it a couple times, and we're going." And I was like, "Okay." And then she told me like a couple months ago, she goes, "Yeah, I was definitely manic, and you probably should have stopped me from doing that." I was like, it was a very weird conversation, but like again, I had no clue what I was looking for, and this is where I say like you're the only one who knows what you're feeling, right? You can't hope that someone else will recognize those things because now that I have seen some things and understand, I can push back a little bit more on Courtney. But 15 years having no clue what I'm supposed to be looking for, I can't say, hey, Courtney, maybe you're bipolar or needs some assessing.
Well, then as I continued to be a principal, the stresses continued and the cycles were getting more often. So I had to really deal with what I wanted to do about that. I don't know if you want me to step in there or you want to talk
gotta go
about
back to point A. Yeah, back up. So
but I tried to fight it on my own. I tried really, really hard not to let people see because I didn't want them to know and I didn't want to have to deal with the situation.
yeah, I remember Courtney telling me she let me see one night like her routine about trying to fall back asleep. And I think I can I share this with you?
Sure.
So I remember Courtney telling me, she goes, I set a timer for 20 minutes and I lay here. And then she goes, and then I have a spot in the closet that I will lay down in for 20 minutes. And then I will go take a bath and light a candle. And when that doesn't work, I lay in this bedroom and I set a 30-minute timer. And it was like 12 different things. And I was just like it really hit me. And I don't mean this to be offensive, but
Okay.
I'm like, this is this is a lot and this is not normal and this is not like okay, it's not going to help you. But I know for you and what you shared with me and kind of shared here now, there's often a lot of shame when it comes to this. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of I don't know what I'm experiencing, and also there's fear about what it might mean if this is true. And for Courtney, she was, I think, afraid, like she said, afraid to tell me, afraid to tell her family. And so this kind of went on for 2 years.
Yeah, I would say,
Most obviously.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say probably like over 3, 4 years, but like it was like one time a year and then once every 6 months and then yeah.
And again, this is Courtney at 35 years old, 36 years old, having already dealt with this at 18. And that's where I say, like, these are not one-time things. These are not like I experienced this at 17 and never do it again. Um, that shame and that fear and that guilt doesn't just magically go away. And so, again, if you are experiencing something, you're the one who has to help yourself. You have to advocate for yourself. The people around you can help put safeguards in, they can help push you, but like it has to be you. And so Courtney got to a point where she kind of realized, like, hey, I'm at a breaking point here and I can't do this alone. And so that was 15 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say just about a year and a half ago that I went back to the doctor and I said like, "Hey, these are what I'm experiencing. It's not unmanageable at this point, but I can tell this is what it is. Like, what should I do?" And, like all good doctors, they're like, "Well, what do you think?" I'm like, "That's what I pay you the money for. Like, why can't you tell me what medicine I should take or not take and when I should do it?" Like, but he was very open and honest with me about like, "Well, do you think you can manage it? Do you think you need meds yet?" So, of course, I don't want to take.
Right, which is again is the reality. Like you're the only person who can assess you. Like no one else knows what's going on inside you. And so even the doctor who's a professional is asking Courtney, because I was in a few of these, he's like, how are you feeling? And if you're not honest, you can't get the help, even if it means admitting things that you might be ashamed of that you've tried.
Yeah.
And so
And I definitely didn't want to go back on medicine. Like I remember thinking back to lithium. It wasn't horrible, but it made my stomach hurt if I didn't eat with food or if I didn't eat before I went to bed. And it made my hair fall out and it gave me acne. Not fall out, but like shed more than usual. But there are downsides of taking medicine, in addition to the fact that I just didn't want to. Like I didn't feel like I needed it. I don't want to take it if I don't have to. So I was like, no, like I think I can still manage it on my own. Like let's give it another little bit. Like I'll try. We'll see how the summer goes because the summer I won't be stressed. I won't be at work every day. I won't have 600 people to be responsible for, whether they're teachers or students and parents. So like let's get to summer and see how summer goes, and then I'll decide. So we went and visited Leni and Aaliyah, who, well, just Leni and her family in Berlin, and then we visited Czech Republic. And while I was there, it was still horrible. Like I had super manic days where I went and roamed the streets of Prague by myself at 3 in the morning because I didn't want to wake up Trevor in the tiny hotel room we were in, but I knew I shouldn't. But I'm like, I have to get out of here. Like I can't just stay in this room any
you
longer.
find yourself roaming the streets of a strange city at 3 in the morning. Maybe a good sign.
I made it back safely, but I knew that things were not right. And then in Berlin, like not wanting to get up, just sleeping in my pajamas, I blamed it on jet lag or something that I was just really unmotivated and feeling like unconfident. And I don't know that I ever defined it as depressed, but I know that it was because I wasn't my normal self. Like I wasn't cheerful or eager at my normal level.
Well, again, it's a good example. Those words mean different things for every person, right? If you hear depression and think like, "Oh, I must be thinking about suicide all the time," that doesn't necessarily mean what it is, right? And so there's lots of ways, again, lots of ways to understand these words. And even if you don't have a medical diagnosis, there's still things that will affect you. And if you don't admit and acknowledge them, they will keep affecting you. And so,
Yeah. So I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but I came home from the vacation and went back to my psychiatrist and said, okay, I'm ready to start medicine. Like, I want to get this under control before I go back to work officially with kids. So, like, you've got a month, figure it out, like, give me the right medicine and let's see how this goes and I'll be fixed. Like, all I needed is this medicine.
I want Courtney to share some of these details because I want you to understand, but I don't want you to be afraid. But I want you to understand that there is no quick fix when it comes to these things.
Would be nice.
There is no one answer fits all. Okay, so the last since July of 2023, um, Courtney doesn't like it when I say this.
There's just some trigger words. Like, you know how if you have something that you don't like about you and somebody says it, it's just more, you take it more sensitively. I've realized I have some trigger words that I didn't think I would have.
I would say that our lives the last 15 months were kind of a train wreck. Let's use that word. Um, and it was because Courtney decided she wanted to go on medicine. And like I said, if you go down this road, and this is not to discourage you because I think it is really good. Some of you will need medications for certain things. There's no shame in that. But medications do things to you when you are taking meds that are messing with your psychology. And so do you want me to share it or do you want to share it?
No, I can do my best.
Yeah, you can go.
I mean, I don't know how to say it short of it was ridiculous. I tell parents all the time if they're looking to put their kids on medicine that it's probably a good thing for them because it's going to be able to help them with things they can't help themselves with, and that they probably won't get the right one the first time, and there probably will be side effects because parents are always like, oh, I don't want them to be zombies, or I don't want them to, like, usually with other medicines that little kids need, it's like they won't have an appetite or things like that. Well, apparently every single bipolar med is a weight gaining medicine, and I've never had to worry about that. I like cupcakes, so I didn't want to have to gain weight. So I was pretty clear that I would prefer to be on a medicine that didn't make me gain weight. So I was like, okay, great. Well, the first one that they put me on, nobody tells you. I mean, I guess technically the pharmacist does on that like long rap sheet, like everything but death, like everything that could go wrong. But like you don't read those because those are like not really true side effects. Like they don't, no, but that doesn't happen to everybody, right? So the first one they put me on, apparently one of the side effects can be extreme mania. Who gives someone a bipolar med that it can be a mania side effect? So I took it for 2 weeks. Trevor leaves for camp with Camp Blast. And we have a killer high school girls party at my house. We were having super great fun. I didn't sleep for the next 3 days, and it was awesome. And then Trevor came home, and I had a bag packed, and I was ready to go anywhere. Like I'm pretty sure I knew I was not good. I took myself to the hospital and was waiting because it's like 4 in the morning. Was waiting to see if I should go in and like admit myself to PBH. Like I went in and asked them like, "Hey, if I admit myself now, can I leave if I think I'm ready to go?" Because I don't want to admit myself because I'm pretty sure there's a 24-hour hold if you think I'm crazy, but if I tell you that I'm crazy, then can I leave if I want to leave? Because I'm not sure I want to stay or not. So eventually it was an appropriate enough time that I could text some people like, hey, I'm awake. Can I come over? So Brad was like, yeah, I'm up. Come on over. And they knew what was going on. And then Trevor quickly found out what was going on, but is exhausted because he just got home from Camp Blast and doesn't have a clue how to take care of my chaos. So it led into an interesting stretch that I only remember bits and pieces of it.
Yeah, I can just tell you. So last August, Courtney basically didn't sleep for 4 days when I got home. I think she slept 90 minutes one day, 2 hours one day. Um, she was telling me things that she doesn't remember. It was basically so out of control that they can't remember it. And we had 24-hour care on her for like, I think 7 days. Um, she had a bag packed with our passports and marriage license in it and said, we can go wherever you want. Let's leave and go now. And I was like, this is not okay. And that's when I learned what bipolar looks like, at least for Courtney, because everyone's bipolar is going to be different. But I learned that day. And then as soon as the medicine, you go off of that medicine, you basically return to being yourself, like very quickly. And it was really weird. And I'm like, what just happened? Um, but then you can briefly share about you tried 4 other medications
Yeah.
last year. So.
Yeah, well, in that first one in the beginning of August was the start of school, so that some had some of the like angst of getting started with the school year, and then I was on FMLA for I think 2 full weeks plus a week of half days because they wouldn't let me come back to work until I was cleared, and then ended up working through a different doctor for a little while with hopes of finding a better medicine because I was frustrated with that process and tried probably 5 or 6 other medicines, all with either not effective or horrible side effects. Like I would say the one that was by far the worst, and I didn't even think about it. Well, there were two, I guess. There were some that I didn't acknowledge that it was a side effect of the medicine until like after the fact. But I was feeling the word I use is anxious, but I don't know if it's the right word because people that experience anxiety, I don't think it's what you would describe for yours. It was like I remember being at a party, like over at the Moravic's house, and there were people everywhere and conversations all around me, and I like couldn't. Like I was like, I gotta get out of here. Like it just felt weird. Like, and that's something I've never experienced. And I tried to describe it, but I was really bad at describing it. And then it happened again. And I was like, yes, that's what it was. So I tried to explain it to my doctor, and she's like, yeah, we're going to take you off that med. I was like, okay, good. And then the next one that they put me on, I would go to lay down, and I think it's probably like restless leg syndrome, except for it was happening with my whole body. So like literally I would just shake, like, and I couldn't stop it. Like if I breathed like as slowly and as deeply as I could focus on it for like 10 seconds and I could try to fall asleep, but then it would just start going again. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't handle
Yeah,
this.
I think you didn't sleep for more than 30 minutes at a time for 2 weeks on that medicine. So she would sleep in 30-minute chunks and then shake herself awake.
I watched so many Disney movies though. It was fantastic.
Um, and this whole time you were working. And so again, we don't say this to scare you. Since April, you have been on a medicine that has, for the most part, kept you stable. For the most part, she has been herself. It took bad medications to get to where we are. But that being said, there were also some real life consequences. I don't know if you want to talk about those briefly.
Yeah. So in my last, if you ever watched my journey video, I talked about how, and I think this is probably the point I teared up the most in the video, was that I was scared about losing my job because it does impact my life and I love what I do, or at least I did. So, long story short, my boss came to work on a day that I was experiencing some, what I consider a minor mania. Like I wasn't off the charts, but I was still very eager and talking fast, and she could tell that something was not quite right. And I don't know what the district would say, but what I felt was they didn't feel safe with me being a principal with my bipolar. So they put me on a forced FMLA and wouldn't let me come back to work. And when I was able to return, they demoted me to an assistant principal. So they took everything that I loved from me, and I was mad. And then I struggled with identity issues because I'm like, who am I without being a principal? Like, that's what I know. That's what I care the most about. That's where I spend like 80 hours a week. Like, that's what I want. So then I would say I probably was depressed for 2 months, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, we were home together actually for 10 weeks. They sent her home for 10 weeks and didn't tell her what was happening, um, which is just insane because this is during the school year. It was literally in March. March
Yeah.
1st, or
Well, at first they were like, just 2 weeks, like get yourself well, and then we'll put a principal like person in your role, and then you'll come back in 2 weeks. So I'm like, okay, fine. If you think I have to, I don't think it's necessary, but I will. But I just thought it was gonna be 2 weeks, and then it was 4 weeks, and then it was like the end of the year, and they're like, well, we don't want you to come back at the end of the year. So they, yeah, it was very special to say the least. So it has a huge impact.
yeah. Anyway, I asked Courtney to share that because I think as teens we tell people, right, you can do whatever you want in life and whatever you set your mind to, you can achieve. Um, I hope this doesn't come across wrong, but the reality is where you are right now might have some limitations with it. And not that there are things you can't work through that you can't get past, but like your health is so important. And if you aren't healthy, you can't help anyone around you. You can't love people. You can't be the best version of you. And so, like, you have to prioritize your health before you can prioritize other things. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that journey is. I mean, Courtney had already been diagnosed bipolar, already understood these things, and it still took us almost a year to get back to that place. And I would tell you, obviously, I'm not the one who's diagnosed, but even walking alongside people who are, I've had to learn a lot. I've had to unlearn and relearn some things, and I would say we're still in the process of getting ourselves, like she shared, with struggling with identity, struggling with where we are now. Like we're still getting to the place where we can be healthy and give back to those around us. Like realizing we're just exhausted from this journey that we've just been on. And so the last question I wanted Courtney to answer, because I think this is something a lot of teenagers wrestle with, and I mean adults as well. But there's some verses in the Bible that talk about how like God knit us together is one in Psalms. God knit you together and He made you. Ephesians 2:10 says that we are God's masterpiece. But I think for a lot of us, we look at ourselves and we see something that's broken and ask, how can God have made us or cared about us if we're broken? Or how can we be a masterpiece if we are broken? And so for Courtney, as someone who is diagnosed bipolar, you have this thing that will probably be with you the rest of your life. There is no cure for it. It is just a hormonal imbalance that affects you. Um, like, how do you reconcile those things, or how do you deal with those internally? And I know you're not someone who thinks a lot about this, and so you can give your best to answer it, but
I guess I just take it all back to the garden. And I know that sounds weird, but like we all have something about us that maybe isn't how God would have made us originally. But then sin came into this world, and we all have our uniquenesses that He uses to glorify Him. So whether it's something about yourself physically that you're just like, ugh, or maybe it's something mentally that you wish was different. I'm just saying, it's real. Ugh.
can't even make that noise.
You got to roll your eyes at the same time. It gives it better. Or maybe it's something like cognitively with your brain, or a disability that you struggle with, or maybe even something with like your family, or something you wish you could do that you can't. Like I am totally tone deaf. I can't sing. I can't blame God for that. I just can't. But I think there are things that if it was a perfect world, that those would be different. But I've never really looked back on God and said like, why did you make me bipolar? I've always just kind of made it a part of who I am and tried to work through that. But I won't say that it's easy. And I wouldn't, if I had the choice, I wouldn't say I would, I mean, I'd give it away in a heartbeat.
Yeah. So I wanted Courtney to share. I know a lot of you will not need medication in your life, which I think you should, hopefully can be grateful for after hearing Courtney's story. But the reality is, you will have emotions and feelings and experiences. The numbers are insane for people who are experiencing loneliness right now, and the mental side effects to go with that. And so for you guys, you have to start to learn to understand what you are feeling. Talk to people around you to understand what you are feeling. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to find systems that you can put in place to help yourself. Um, I give Courtney a ton of credit, and it's one of the things that broke my heart the most. Like, Courtney read so many self-help books and listened to bipolar podcasts and tried 100 different things before we got to the point of medication. Um, and even then had to try 6 medications to get to where we are. And so for you guys, it may not be the first try, but the only person who can help yourself is you. The only person who can advocate for yourself. And you have to be honest about what you're feeling. You have to be able to push past the shame and guilt. There is no shame in what you are feeling and experiencing. Even if they're irrational thoughts, there's still no shame in them. Um, Now, sometimes you may have to learn that they're irrational and accept that, but that doesn't mean we carry shame and guilt for those things. And so, like I said, I am not diagnosed with anything. I have a couple experiences with that depression. I've had to learn what I need in life and what keeps me going. And I think you guys are the same. And even if you're saying I don't have a clue what you're talking about right now, my guess is at some point in your life you will have to experience these things. And so Courtney is a great resource. She's talked to a lot of people. If there's things that you have, mental health stuff you ever want to, we are at the church almost every Sunday still. If you ever want to talk to her, grab her, um, just let us know. But otherwise, we're gonna head to small group now. It is 7:20. Went a little longer than we thought we would. So you guys still have about 40 minutes. But I assume you know where you're all going for small group, or perfect.
All right. Well, eat some more popcorn and thanks for listening, guys. You're a great attentive audience.